project at Caltech. So I was there during the time I applied, so I got a lot of advice from my friends there, and that inspired me to apply to the US. So any questions you have on grad school or how I looked or how I chose places, send them on.
Awesome.
I guess. Oh, you're Jayden. Yourself.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Jayden. I'm also, I guess, the second/incoming third year grad student in Jeff Grossman's group. You might have heard of him. Yeah, and I also applied to 4 schools in the US. I'm also from Canada, so I applied as an international student, but I had worked a lot in labs in different places in the US, so I had kind of a bit of an idea how what the environment was like before applying. And I'd also researched at MIT, so kind of similar to Europe experiences that you guys might be having. So yeah, happy to answer any questions in that context, either being an international student or having experiences with professors that you worked with here.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Jackson, and I'm going to be a 4th year student in the fall. I work in Caroline Ross's group. I'm from Nebraska, so not an international student, but I switched fields from chemical engineering to material science. I applied and with my research. So feel free to ask about that if you have any.
Hey everyone, I'm Ty. I'm also a rising 4th year grad student. I'm in Julia Ortoni's group. I did my undergrad in Florida, which sometimes feels international, but is not. Yeah, I think I did my undergrad also in material science, so probably the most conventional route to here.
I forgot to say my undergrad was nanoscience, so kind of weird, but I was coming from a slightly different background. So I looked at a lot of different departments, but people can ask me.
Hi everyone, I'm Margaret. I'm a rising 4th year PhD student. I work in Robert McFarlane's lab. I am from California, but did my undergrad in Chicago. So I guess feel free to ask me questions about either of those 2 states. I did my undergrad in chemistry and applied to graduate programs in both chemistry and materials. So I guess if you're considering different like degree programs, I can help with that. What else? I guess that's about it for now.
Thanks. So is that it for introductions? If so, we can just open up the floor so that whoever has a question can ask. And then maybe what we can do is we can just use like the little raise your hand button, just so we don't have, or just so it doesn't get complicated with people like talking over each other. So I think the first hand I saw was Sophia's. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. So I guess my question encapsulates a lot of things, so answer whatever bits and pieces that you wish. But I'm interested in what other graduate school programs you had looked into and had like prioritized in addition to MIT, and why, based on your undergraduate experience and like any research projects you had done as an undergraduate.
Yeah, so I guess we can go in the order that everyone introduce themselves if everyone wants to answer this question. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but whoever wants to answer, feel free, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I'm first then. So I applied to 5 schools. They were MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, what was the other? Caltech, and Cambridge. So Cambridge University in the UK. So I was considering the UK because it's close to where I'm from, and Cambridge is a really great school. My undergrad is in nanoscience, so they had a particular program that was focused on nanoscience. So I was interested in that. Caltech, I guess I had done some undergrad research there, and that was, you know, I really enjoyed that aspect of it and my research group there. And then Stanford, MIT, and UC Berkeley, I was just like, they seem cool. Let's let's apply there. So I guess your question was on given your undergrad background. So yeah, mine was in nano. So I was looking at places that had a really strong focus on like nanoscience and like nanotechnology. So in the end of the day, that was kind of what sold MIT for me, was the MIT nano facilities that I toured. When I toured, I was like, they were just being built. So that was kind of like a big factor in my decision, that I was like, I mean, personally, my career prospects, I kind of want to go into academia. So I was looking for somewhere that had a combination of like good name recognition for my PhD and like name recognition back in Europe too, if I wanted to go back. So there's a lot of great schools in the US that people mightn't necessarily know of in Europe, and it wouldn't like hold as much weight. So, I mean, it's sad to say it, but that was a factor in my decision. And then focus on nanotechnology and a bunch of professors that I thought I could work with. I also took a year out in between my undergraduate and my PhD, but I applied in my senior year of undergrad. So I applied and I deferred for a year. So that's why I wouldn't recommend applying to as little schools as I did. Like, I was lucky that I got into them, but like, I'd say like definitely apply. Like my plan was like, I'll apply to my top schools. If I don't get into them, I have a whole other year to apply to more. So that was my reasoning for my application processes.
I guess, yeah, in my case, I had applied to, I think, similar schools. So I applied to MIT, both like material science and ECS. I had also applied to UC Berkeley, ECS, and Stanford material science, and yeah, Harvard, and then University of Toronto, just kind of as a fallback, a Canadian fallback. So, and my background is also in nanotechnology engineering, which is similar to nanoscience, but like less science and more engineering, whatever that means. So my background was kind of looking at a little bit of chemical engineering, a little bit of chemistry, and a little bit of electrical engineering in kind of throughout my undergrad program. But I was always interested quite a bit in the materials aspect. So right now, I guess, you know, my research focuses on both the electronics and the materials, or I would say the electrical properties of materials. So that's what I was looking for in kind of a grad program that I was going to go into. And I would say that, yeah, my decision kind of came down to the fact that I had worked with a couple of professors at MIT. So I had that familiarity, and looking at the other places, I felt like it wasn't as much of a fit in terms of both the research aspect, but also the community aspect. So yeah, those are both things that I considered very strongly. And that's kind of what eventually led me to this decision. But yeah, my research was kind of varied along, like, at least in my undergrad experiences, along like different aspects of like of nanotechnology, which kind of shaped what I was interested in the future, but it didn't really define what I wanted to go into as a research, like a specific research topic. So yeah, I think the main takeaway from that is like, it's okay to have a broad research interest based on, you know, whatever experiences you have in undergrad, and even not to go into the same thing that you researched or worked on in undergrad. That's totally fine. And we've seen it a lot, especially in our classmates.
Oh, just a quick note before the next speaker. We want to cut this question off before 4:25, just so that everyone has a chance to speak. So if you're going to speak, go ahead. Not rushing anybody, but just so we have time.
Okay, I'll be pretty brief. I applied to 9 schools, I think, MIT, Berkeley, Minnesota, Michigan, and a few others. But the biggest factor in selecting schools for me was I wasn't sure what I wanted to work on. I had done some undergrad research in organic chemistry, knew I didn't want to do that. but I just looked at departments that had a number of faculty I could see myself working with, which I think is a good choice for everyone to make. Other than that, that was my biggest criteria. I didn't focus too much on the facilities because I didn't really know what I wanted to work on. And I hadn't done any sort of super technical, super expensive equipment requiring research yet anyway.
Yeah, I think I will also be quick. My process was very shamefully starting with the US News reports that rank schools and working backwards from there. So I followed the like reach schools and then safety schools kind of strategy. I applied to 6, MIT, Northwestern, UC Berkeley, Illinois, Michigan, and Florida, which was my home institution. I felt like at the time, and then I looked at all those schools and then kind of made sure that there was enough there that I'm interested in doing. I think kind of the advice I took going into that, which I still find to be very true, is it's important to have research you're interested in, but it's almost more important to have advisors that you can have a good relationship with. And I think that's a little difficult to pick up on just from looking at websites and stuff like that. And every school will have bad advisors, but every school will also have good advisors. And so I felt like, if I could kind of get into the schools, then I'd be able to find advisors that were both working in a field that I was comfortable with, as long as there was enough people doing something there. Yeah, that's about my contribution.
I applied to, I believe, 6 schools in total. So Harvard, MIT, Stanford, UC Berkeley, Caltech, and Cambridge in the UK, which was actually because I was also applying for the Churchill Scholarship. So that one didn't really count. I did not apply to any safety schools, basically because if I didn't get into any one of them, I was just going to go work. Mainly because I did a dual degree program in undergrad, so I already had a master's degree. So that was the only reason. I would in general recommend applying to a safety school, unless you're the type of person that's if I don't go to one of these X number of schools, then I'm just not going to do it. For me, in terms of how I decided between applying for chemistry versus applying for material science, was that I did my undergrad research in nanoscale self-assembly, which, depending on the institute, is sometimes categorized in the Department of Chemistry and sometimes in material science. So I kind of just looked through the faculty lists for both departments at each school, and then based on how many, which department had more faculty I was interested in, that's how I decided which program to apply to. And I guess background, my undergrad was University of Chicago, which does not have material science. So I was also I should apply to some PhD programs in chemistry in case I don't get into anything materials, because I had pretty much zero academic experience with it. And then in terms of choosing institutes, I was unsure whether or not I wanted to keep doing nanomaterials related research. So when I was looking at institutes, I was looking for places that had both that and also other research topics that I was interested in and could potentially see myself doing research on in grad school. So for MIT, one of the deciding factors was the fact that the materials program here has the program for polymers and soft matter, PPSM. So that aligned more with my research interests. And yep.
Okay, thanks. So let's go on to the next questions. I think the second hand I saw was Richard.
Okay, so mine is a bit targeted, so it's probably not, I don't know, people, if this applies to you, I guess, feel free to chime in. My question kind of goes back to that point of this idea of considering chemical engineering or chemistry or materials, considering which to apply for. And so I guess particularly for Jackson and Margaret, do you feel your background, do you feel there were gaps coming in in terms of what you learned in undergrad versus what was expected coming in on the material science side, or has that not been a problem? It's kind of a vague question, but feel free to take it wherever you want.
Okay. In terms of knowledge gaps, yes, there were definitely gaps. But I think that's true of almost every single student in every program. Me, for example, I had never taken a mechanics class, so when that was one of the 4 core classes, that was a rude awakening. I had a rudimentary understanding of quantum mechanics, and I still have only a rudimentary understanding of quantum mechanics, but I passed somehow. So that was certainly an adjustment, but something that every grad student has to deal with. In terms of research, I had worked exclusively in like a wet chemistry lab, and now I grow thin films and use a lot of vacuum equipment and magnetometers and things like that. So I had no experience, but the grad students and postdocs in my lab like trained me how to do things and figured some other stuff out for myself. So the learning curve wasn't terrible, but it certainly existed. And I think like for most disciplines that people in here are probably considering, you know, chemical engineering, materials, chemistry, that sort of area, there's enough overlap that it shouldn't be a significant roadblock to wanting to apply to a different program.
And if I can really quickly jump on that, because I forgot, I was also going to ask, did you strictly apply to material science programs, or did you apply across different disciplines?
I think I applied to a couple chemical engineering programs as well. I know at the University of Minnesota, the chemical engineering and materials science departments are combined. But it was primarily material science because I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I definitely also had like gaps coming in. When I did my chemistry degree, I was a little more focused on organic chemistry. And if you've taken PChem, like physical chemistry, quantum and thermodynamics is most definitely not like material science, quantum and thermodynamics kinetics. So those are definitely the classes I struggled the most in. Conversely, I didn't have I didn't have nearly as much trouble with the PPSM core classes because they're more chemistry and synthesis heavy. In terms of research, I feel like everyone comes in having like more background on something than something else, and then because everyone in lab comes from a different research and major background, you kind of, like when you're talking with people, get gaps filled in.
Okay, thanks. So next up on the question list would be Kirsten.
So I have a question. I've heard from like different people that sometimes it can be good while someone's applying to a PhD program to contact professors or groups they're interested in. And I'm like wondering how well accepted that is. Like if I already have groups I'm interested in, like building relationships with professors while I'm applying, or when did people start talking with groups?
Before anyone answers, if you want to, shameless plug, if you want to watch the video that Lauren and I recorded with the other grad student, we talked a little bit about this, but of course, give another answer, of course.
I'm happy to start because I did do this. It's actually funny, I was thinking about it this morning. I only sent emails to faculty at schools I thought I had a chance of getting into. So I didn't do that to MIT. And the irony is that here I am now. But I think like sending emails can be a good way of just getting your foot in the door. And I think the primary motivation of doing it is just so that they recognize your name when they're going through applications. I don't think there has to be a lot of expectation or emphasis that they'll reach back out to you or that you'll really have like an in-depth conversation. But I think it can be valuable in just introducing yourself to them personally and just saying a couple quick things about who you are, what skills you have that they might be interested in, and kind of saying hello so that they recognize your name, without really expecting them to kind of, I think I only had one real conversation come out of that with a professor. So.
Yeah, I would kind of like echo what Ty said. Like I got again mixed opinions and mixed feedback. So some of the Californian schools, I know when I was applying, at least UC Berkeley and Stanford said, okay, fill out these list of professors like in an order you would like to work with them. And for that was like a really good way to start connecting with people, to say like, hey, you know, we have to fill out this, I'm applying, this is my background, we have to fill out this form, and I was considering like you're one of my top choices. I kind of always made it in the sense of like, I'm trying to gauge like if you have like space in your group, or like not like a, like I want to work with, saying I want to work with you, but like not in the sense that they needed to reply a yes or no for definite, but more of a like, hey, I'm introducing myself. For MIT, they're very more agnostic. Like they, I don't think they, so those schools I think admit based on like who the professors want, but I feel like MIT admits like they just admit a bunch of students and then you go to different professors. So for MIT, I don't think I got any responses, or I got one or two responses saying just like, I'll talk to you after admissions, basically. So a lot of professors will say that. And I'd say don't be disheartened if you don't get replies, and don't feel that that's not the place for you is the main thing. But I still don't know whether I think for some schools it helps and for some schools it doesn't, depending on how they do the admissions process, but that's hard to know. But I always contacted maybe one or two in each school that I was applying to.
Yeah, my perspective on this is like, it's always a good idea to like frame it in a way that you're just trying to gather information, right? Rather than saying, hey, do you have space in your lab? And if so, can you hire me, right? So explicitly asking or trying to, you know, framing it in a way that in any way implies that you're trying to garner favor might not work well. But framing it in a way where you want to just find out more about the lab or more about the research, I think that's, you know, there's no harm in doing that. And yeah, in some cases it can benefit you. At worst, you won't get a reply. So that's my little piece of advice for that.
I'm sorry, just one thing. John put in a really good note in that some forward your application to PI and faculty. And actually something else that people don't consider is that lots of places use this for incoming first year fellowships. So if a faculty is willing to back you for a fellowship, like I know MIT has like incoming first year fellowships, and it has to be the faculty puts in an application saying, I want this student for this fellowship, I think they'd be good for it. So that was what I got with Stanford. I was like in contact with one professor and they nominated me for this, but like if I wasn't in contact with them, I wouldn't have gotten that. So I do think an email can enhance your chances a little bit.
I'll just say quickly that I did not contact anyone, partly because I received mixed advice and just decided against it since I did not know what I wanted to do, and it worked out okay as well.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Jackson in that at the time I had like huge anxiety about emailing professors. So with the exception of University of Cambridge, wherein it was mandatory that I Skype with a professor, other than that, for all of my US applications, I did not contact a single professor. And it turned out okay. But I will also try, and I definitely got mixed feedback between, like, there were people who told me like they thought that contacting professors really helped, and then there are also people who told me like they contacted professors and then got told like, I will not talk to you unless you've been admitted.
Okay, so if that's it for the responses, I think the next hands I saw were from Heidi and Adira, but I can't remember who was first. So maybe let's go with Heidi, and then Adira, we can answer yours next.
Yeah, so I guess I have just a really basic question because I'm still kind of like deciding if I want to apply to grad school. So I guess I'm wondering like what made you decide to go to grad school, and like if the decision was based on like your plans post grad school, and like I guess how you decided, and I don't know, like anything regarding that journey.
I guess I can start off with this one. So I spent the first like 3 years of undergrad saying that I was not going to get a PhD. So what changed my mind was, I guess, mainly two things. One was my summer research experience the summer after my third year that I really enjoyed. Because like prior to that, like research was fine, but I wasn't like, I don't really know, like I don't really feel like I'd want to commit to a full PhD of this. But then the summer third year research, I was like, oh, like I would definitely want to do this for a PhD. The other thing is in terms of just kind of jobs that I was interested in, a lot of them still required either like a master's or a PhD. So that was my second consideration. I think the main thing is research. Like I've had people ask me like, oh, like I feel like my GPA is not that great, and like class research. So if you feel like you really enjoy the research application, hope that helps.
I guess, yeah, I can go next. So I would say that I kind of knew based on like my first like couple of research experiences that I wanted to kind of do research because I enjoyed research. So I think that's kind of, I didn't think too much about the career aspect more than I thought that, you know, hey, I like doing research and let me continue this. And I know that if I do a PhD, then I can sustain doing research. And I think that, you know, that's quite important because, you know, you're going to be doing it for 5 years. And so like, it is important to consider like the career aspect, but I also think you need to know that, you know, it's gonna be tough. So you need to like, to some degree, enjoy that process. And it's good to have an idea of whether you do. So always good to like have some sort of year op or experience beforehand to decide that for yourself. That's not the be all end all, because in some cases, you know, you might have very experiences or very bad ones, but and like it might not match what you experience in grad school, but that was kind of a huge motivation for me, just saying that I enjoyed the experience of doing research in like different fields, no matter what field I was researching in. So I wanted to do that for the next 5 years after undergrad.
Yeah, mine was like I kind of always thought I wanted to go into academia. So then a PhD was kind of a natural progression for me, or something that I had to do to get that job that I wanted. But I couldn't hack it after. I knew that this was something that I wanted, but I was just so dead after undergrad that I was like, I can't go into it right now. Like I know that I will enjoy this, but I won't enjoy it if I go straight. So that's why I took my year off and just had a year to like live my life. And that is something that I'd like recommend everyone do if they can. But that year, like I think if I hadn't had that year, it would have been a different decision. But the PhD was something that I knew I wanted to do, but it wasn't a matter of if, it was kind of like when. So
when I decided to go to grad school, I came to that realization the summer before my senior fall, which is I guess where most of you are now. I had really enjoyed doing internships, and I realized when I was in those internships that the people who were moving up the fastest in these really large companies were people who had PhDs. And when I talked to them about why that was happening, they pretty much all pointed to the fact that it was just their PhD that was helping them get their promotion. So I came in with a very simple mindset that if I want to also move up fast in companies, I needed to get a PhD. I feel like since I've been here, my post-grad goals have shifted around a lot. And I would actually, for a lot of people in grad school, that can be really nerve-wracking to not quite know what you want to do when you get out. But I also find that to be really exciting. A lot of people say they go to graduate school because they don't really know what they want to do next. Kind of jokingly, but I think that's also a really excellent reason to go to graduate school because it opens so many doors for you. And you're trading in sort of getting a good paycheck for a little bit to have a lot of freedom to explore different things to do. So I think that's something I didn't really, I came in kind of unilaterally expecting to go directly back out into industry. And since I've been here, I've been really appreciative to have sort of an unending stream of opportunities to try different things and use that to figure out where I want to go.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in with one last quick thing so the summer research I did right before my senior year was kind of like what pushed me more towards PhD. But then the master's degree I did was also like, okay, like I had this really good summer, but I'm not 100% convinced. So I'll do the master's degree. Master's degree in chemistry is basically the same as doing the first year of your PhD in chemistry, where you take some classes and then are also doing research. So I was like, so if I like it, then like for sure PhD. And even if I don't, it was the fourth year of my undergrad, so it ended up taking the same amount of time. So I think that's also something that a few people do, where if you have the space in your schedule, your senior year, you can try out a graduate class of some topic that you're interested in. And that won't give you like a full grad student experience, but it'll give you a little bit. And then also because a lot of your classmates are grad students, you can kind of ask them for their opinions on things.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, we have Adira.
Hi, yes, I just want to, how do you research schools? Like, I feel like it's sort of a fairly easy thing to do looking at where you want to go for undergrad, because there's a lot of people who will be like, oh, and this is where you look and this is how you do it. But I feel very much like, there are graduate programs. Cool. Now what?
I suppose I can start. As Ty said, and I think all of us were thinking, I definitely looked at the U.S. News and World Report to get an idea of the quote-unquote best schools in an area. But if you do some research and try and see like what schools are the best in chemistry, like there's sources beyond that. Another thing I did is I just looked at the large schools in terms of population. So being from the Midwest, I was aware of like the University of Minnesota and University of Michigan, and they were also in the same conferences where I went, Nebraska. So I had a pretty good idea about them. But just looking at lists of universities that have departments in areas you could see yourself working, and then it is a lot of time going through those departments and looking at all the individual faculty's web pages and reading enough of it to get a grasp of what they do, if they're currently active, and whatever information you want beyond that. So it's pretty time consuming. And unfortunately, there's not a great way to do it that I used, but maybe someone else has some better input on that.
Yeah, mine was kind of much more simple, I guess. Yeah, like Jackson said, I went to kind of material science. I also applied to applied physics departments, but I took, say, like the top 10 schools department wise, and then I crossed out all the ones that were in a location that I did not want to live in. So you'll notice that I only applied like on the East Coast or California. But like that was my naive thing from Ireland. But I mean, I realized that I was going to be in my 20s throughout my PhD, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to cross out anywhere where like personally I don't want to live. And then, you know, I did a quick overview of the department professors to make sure there was like a few that whose research topics I would be interested in. But the further deep delve into the professors came kind of later in the application process. But when I was just first deciding, yeah, it was really what Jackson said, like take the top few schools and rule out any that you don't want to go there to live.
Yeah, so since I did my undergrad in Chicago, I wanted to do grad school in a different city, which was like really the only reason I did not apply to Midwest schools. So that's kind of my shallow reason for unfortunately crossing out like a third of the country. And then similar to what everyone else has mentioned, I think depending on like I think particularly for if you're considering something in academia, unfortunately you do have to consider the like name recognition brandiness or whatever of your university. And then I went through all the faculty in the department, and I think like crashed my browser with the number of tabs, which like Jackson said will take time, but I definitely think is worth doing. Because if there's only like one faculty at the entire university that you're interested in, like unless you can guarantee that you can get into this person's lab and that you will also enjoy being in this person's lab, I feel like it's generally better to like kind of have a few options, because there were faculty members that like I was like, oh, I was really interested in their website, but then on the campus visit I was like, nope. And then like also vice versa, where I was like, website seems okay, and then I met them in person and was like, oh, I really like this. Another resource is if you're doing research in a group at MIT, or just even like UROPing somewhere, you can ask the grad students in your lab, and they'll tell you about like their undergrads. And then also, because like even though this grad student is at MIT, like a bunch of people that they met doing the grad student tours are at different grad schools across the country. So they can also give you like information about what they thought, how they felt about their tour, and then also just like things they learned from their friends at other institutions.
Yeah, just to briefly add, I guess the way that I decided it was based on like based on certain like grad mentors that I've had over the past like couple of years during my undergrad, and just kind of it was just kind of an agglomeration of all the graduate schools that they recommended, and I would weight that based on what fields or what research I liked. So you know, from that I also got kind of the perspectives that that you wouldn't typically get from like looking at rankings, such as like, you know, what is the graduate student experience. So those kind of anecdotes are very helpful in deciding certain schools. So yeah, that definitely like helped my process. I mean, it's still kind of bogged down to the same kind of list that other people have been referring to, but it helped put it into perspective a little bit.
Oh, did you
Yeah,
have?
I was sorry, I was just typing on the chat, but I'll just say it quickly. Jayton brought up a good point that a lot of professors, grad students, and postdocs in the particular area you're looking at will automatically know what the top groups and the top programs are for that particular field. And so I mean, you can see by the length of our answers, like we love talking about our experience. So like so many of them will be down to help you if you say, hey, I'm an undergrad, I'm thinking of applying places, what do you think? So a lot of postdoc mentors and grad student mentors that I had helped me out to say the groups.
One quick comment I had on sort of in the same vein of kind of reverse engineering it is if you're really stuck, you can look at conferences on topics you care about and just look in the programs and see where the professors there are from and go from there. I think when you go to the visit weekends for grad schools, especially for domestic students, you find out that pretty much everyone ended up applying to the same places. So, and you kind of travel together. We can probably write some of those down in the chat if that's helpful for people to see. But somehow everyone ends up, I think, with the same list of about 6 to 10 schools.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I saw a thumbs up, so that would be great if you could send us that list afterwards. But anyways, the next person we have on the list is Alana.
Hello. So my question was, or I kind of have two questions. So how this differed from like undergrad applications in terms of maybe like interviews, like do you still have to do that with each different school? And also, I guess this is another super broad question, but like, how are you enjoying grad school? Because I remember talking with one grad student at MIT who shall go unnamed, and they seem to not be enjoying it that much, but I know it's different for everyone. So whether it like lived up to your expectations or, yeah.
I guess I'll start. For application process, I would say for undergrad, I only applied to one school. It was kind of a foregone conclusion where I was going due to cost. But in terms of the enjoyment of grad school, I also didn't have any grad school interviews. So I don't know if that's a thing other people experienced. I know people in other disciplines that I was friends with have, but wasn't aware of that in material science. But in terms of enjoying grad school, I actually enjoy it very much. I know there are certainly students who are not having as good of a time, but amongst my circle at least, they seem to be in the minority. MIT seems to have a pretty supportive culture, especially among the students, but that extends to the faculty and staff as well. Even if it's just commiserating that your experiments aren't working, for the second month straight. But I've had a good experience. I don't have any regrets.
Regarding interviews, it is very much based on what department you're applying to. So chemistry and material science don't have interviews. It's predominantly the life science and medical related fields that will have interviews. So my roommate in undergrad was applying to biology and biochemistry programs, and she had interviews for all of the schools that she applied to. With regards to grad school, it has been like not bad. Like I think it's kind of like with everything, there are like some things that did not meet my expectations, but then there are also many things that exceeded my expectations. So overall, I'd say I'm fairly happy with my current grad student experience. And I think some of that can also come down to like nothing in grad school is ever going to be exactly as you expect it to. And I think kind of figuring out like which parts are most important to you kind of helps with that, which I apologize, I realize also sounds very vague.
Yeah, in terms of, I guess, the interview question, for the most part, applying to material science and electrical engineering programs, I did not have any interviews, except this one time where an unnamed professor from MIT ECS just called me randomly and just like interviewed me right there. I was not given any warning. And then they called me again and asked me the same questions about a week later. So that's just to entertain you with that thought. There's like a 0.01% chance that that can happen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen as far as material science and electrical engineering go. But I think that process happens when you get accepted to the schools anyways. But I wouldn't consider it an interview. It's more of, you're meeting with professors. So that aspect is still there. They'll be, judging how good of a fit you are for their lab based on knowing that you're accepted and then talking to you there. So, and in terms of enjoying grad school, yeah, I want to echo Margaret's comments. I think, I'm enjoying it so far, but that's been due to the fact that, I've had a lot of flexibility to kind of explore what aspects I like to do. And when I, also run in with things I don't like to do, and being able to adjust and accepting that, you can't shape your experience from the get-go is very important. And being flexible to that change and kind of going with the flow is crucial to like enjoy the experience.
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in. I think we've hit the interviews now, but I feel like your research experience in grad school depends a lot on the advisor you have and your relationship with them. And sort of coming out of that, how much time outside of research you're able to carve out for yourself. I sort of came into grad school with the mentality that I wanted to treat it like a job rather than going to school. So it felt a little different in that regard. But definitely there's been like an overwhelming amount of opportunity to do things outside of lab. And I think that's been equally as, if not more enriching for me in this experience. And really discovering what I like to do and setting myself up for what to do after I'm done here. So, and I've loved that part a lot.
Yeah, I think, and this is something, if it doesn't come in other places, I'd just like to echo now, is that wherever you go for grad school, this was told to me so many times, and I heeded it like in the end with my advisor that I chose, but it's like way more about the advisor and the people you're working with than it is about the like actual research you're doing when you choose it. So like when I say that, I mean that your grad school experience is so determined by the people who are around you, and like at the top of that is your advisor, your boss, and then there's also your group members, and then there's also your class. So and how much time, as Ty said, you take for yourself, and that you realize that yes, I'm in school, but this is also my job and it's part of my life. So for me, yeah, I was like quite strict with those boundaries, and I love grad school. Like it's like, if I could get paid to just learn for the rest of my life, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that any day. But clearly there's bad days, and there's days where you feel overwhelmed and like, there's a lot going on. But I think if you go in with the mentality of like, I want to surround myself with good people who are going to allow me to learn, and to learn in like a supportive environment in the way that I want to learn, then it's like you get paid to learn. You get paid to do new things every day. So that's the way I try to see it. Again, I have the most amazing advisor in the world, if you've ever met Francis. But I think that's the most important thing when you go in, is choosing a group that fits well.
Okay, so I think we're starting to run out of time. So maybe the next two questions, let's answer a little bit faster.
Yeah, or we could just cut it after Sophia's question if we want. And if we want, we could have like send out emails of everybody if that would be comfortable for you. Okay, that'd be helpful.
That's good. Okay, so Alex, you're next.
Cool. So I guess my question, people have been touching on it a little bit, but the way to get a sense of not just will you like sort of the research that the professor is doing, but sort of what the group dynamic is and ways to really get a sense of that, especially I'm a rising senior. Given everything that's happening, who knows if there'll be grad school visits? And ways to sort of figure that out of what the dynamics are, of whether or not there is a work-life balance or if it's just work, work, work.
My advice would be not to worry about that now. I would say focus at this point just on getting into schools, and you know, you can tailor your applications a little more to the research that professors are doing in that regard. And then when you're at the grad school visit weekends and you have an opportunity to interact with grad students in particular, I think that's your best window into the environment at the school, as well as to what each particular lab group's experience is like. But I wouldn't worry at this point too much about figuring out what each lab group culture is. That's my 2 cents in 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Ty said, for my whole senior year, like up until I think arrived at MIT, I had like a list of professors that I was interested in, but I didn't look deeply into until I started deciding what group I fully wanted to join. I didn't look deeply into the dynamics. But in terms of like, if you do want to, like when you get there, if I don't get a chance to talk to you again, talk to the grad students. Just like 100% talk to as many grad students as I would. Go onto the page and I'd find the person who looked the friendliest in their picture and send them an email and literally be like, hey, I'm really considering the group. I wonder if you'd be willing to meet me for a coffee or a tea. And then like all grad students are usually quite caring, and like if they will be quite candid. If you like, try not to do it too much over email and like meet them or have a Zoom conversation with them if it's not like, you know, I remember I messaged one girl who was at a group at Stanford, so like unnamed, and she was like, hey, I don't want to reply to this by email, can you Skype? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then she Skyped me and she was like, don't go to this group. so people will be, grad students will be candid with you. Like definitely have a few questions that you want to get out, you know, so it's like, what are they like if you want to take a few extra days off? What are they like if, you know, what's your usual work day? Like, is there, you can usually see if there's diversity in the lab by like, if you look at their webpage and like they have pictures there. So like just a bunch of different things. I had a spreadsheet of stuff that I cared about and I'd like literally go through it. So yeah. But talk to the grad students.
Yeah, my advice on this is like, basically I guess like focused more and more as I had more information on where I was going, right? So like before I actually got admission into grad schools, like I would just generally decide whether I wanted to apply. And once I had those admissions, I think I got into, like basically only 3 of the schools that I applied to. So based on that, I did a little bit more research into the professors and their research. And then once I was at the visits, then I started focusing on grad students in the lab, you know, a bit of lab culture. So at that point, it's like kind of narrowing down the professors you want to work with. And then based on that, doing a bit more of a deep analysis of like, you know, okay, talking to the grad students, figuring out the lab culture and things like that. So it's just so like, just so if it like takes a lot of time, you can like use that approach perhaps to kind of focus in first on who you want to really find out about, and then talk to grad students after that. And when you're on campus, at least in the case of MIT, you have the first 4 months of your grad degree anyways to kind of find professors, at least for DMSE. So yeah, just like keeping those like policies or rules in mind, and just giving yourself time to do like that research.
Okay, does anyone have any like last minute thoughts, quick thoughts? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
I just want to quickly say, it's a very random piece of advice, but be shameless about finding and using fee waivers for grad school apps. Grad school apps are ridiculously expensive for no reason. The bar to getting fee waivers is usually very low, and they're usually underutilized. So find them. The Big 10 schools also have an alliance outside of like schools offering their own fee waivers. There's like a Big 10 group called like Free App or something where you can get fee waivers. Find them, use them, take advantage of them. Yes, too much money for grad school apps. EOM.
Another thing I wanted to say is that if a group of you are applying, or like something I did with my friend is that we had this like a Google Doc where we could like, you know, one of my close friends where we'd like edit each other's, like get as much feedback as you can, like even from your parents or from like mentors or people you vaguely know or people who have done it before, like get as much feedback as possible. Or I asked a few grad students that I knew at the time for their application packages, like, you know, to see what a successful application package looks like. That like if they're comfortable giving it to you, like that helped a lot to see that type of stuff, because sometimes the personal statement is not, it's kind of quite different to personal statements you might write for undergrad. So just to like ask people or, you know, collaborate with people, stuff like that.
Last super quick advice. The professors that you're asking for recommendation letters, reach out to them at least a month, if not more, in advance. Just make them write those letters. And if you need to apply to different departments, they will like change a few letters here and there, or like change a few words here and there, and they're done. So just make sure they start writing that letter really early.
Okay, so thank you all again for being here, and thanks so much to the grad students. So
Thank you.
yeah, if you guys have any other questions, if you have any more like resources you want me and Thomas to compile for you guys that are career related, just let us know.
Yeah.
Could you send out like an email with like all of you guys, all the grad students' emails who are willing to have us email them?
Only if they're